How do you begin the story of Mini? I could bore you with cliché comparisons to other British icons, like the Beatles, James Bond, and the most important member of the British royal family, Mr. Bean. Or perhaps a more convincing way to sell the story is by telling you that one of motorsport's most successful icons was never meant to race at all. In fact, a fuel shortage, a man who had it out for German bubble cars, and a Formula car designer are all to thank when it comes to the Mini's racing dominance. This is the story of how Mini changed racing forever.
This is not the view you want when navigating the Suez Canal.
Remember when the Suez Canal was blocked by a stuck container ship in 2021? Well, it turns out there was a far worse version of this back in 1956. The SparkNotes summary is that this guy got mad when these people refused to pay for a dam he wanted to build. So he put control of the Suez Canal entirely in the hands of the Egyptian government. Britain and France didn't want their main passageway for oil controlled by someone else, so they convinced Israel to invade Egypt as the bad guy, just so they could come back in later as heroic peacekeepers and regain control of the canal. Everything went just as planned until the war sunk some 40 ships and blocked off the canal completely. Oops. No oil coming in meant no gasoline. Petrol. The British government introduced petrol rationing in December, limiting people to 200 miles worth of fuel per month, at a price per litre up around 50%. Nobody wanted to purchase big thirsty cars anymore, and employees at Ford and Vauxhall enjoyed an extra day off with their limited production hours. But as Einstein once said, in the midst of every crisis lies great opportunity. And opportunity there was, for these things. Bubble cars that were once the laughingstock of the automotive market started to become a practical fuel-sipping option for people to consider, and the streets of the UK were littered with more and more of them zipping around. But the head of the British Motor Corporation, Leonard Lord, wasn't having it. He vowed to create a car that would rid the streets of ugly bubble cars once and for all, and tapped one of his most successful designers, Alec Issigonis, for the project. Lord dumped some key design constraints on Issigonis' desk and left him to get to work. The car had to fit into a 10-foot by 4-foot by 4-foot box, with at least 6 of the 10 feet reserved for passenger space, and an existing BMC engine needed to be used to keep costs down. Nobody knew it at the time, but these design constraints would force some engineering decisions that would birth one of the most successful racing cars ever devised. Issigonis and his team placed tiny 10-inch wheels at the very corners of the vehicle to maximize space. The engine selected was a BMC A-Series unit, similar to the one used in Issigonis' previous design success, the Morris Minor. But with space savings in mind, the team mounted the engine transversely, with the gearbox underneath. Better yet, for simplicity, the gearbox was mounted inside the engine's sump and shared the same oil. For the suspension design, Issigonis passed the responsibility to his friend, Dr. Alex Moulton, who by nature liked to do things a little bit differently. Moulton scrapped the idea of using traditional springs, and instead worked towards designing a hydrolastic system, which used interconnected fluid-filled displacers. More on those later. The system wasn't done in time for the Mini's release, so Moulton was forced to go with a much simpler design instead. I'd like to say he took inspiration from a toilet plunger, as that would make for a much more interesting story, but I have no proof of that, so we'll keep moving. Stiff rubber cones were used at each corner of the car, in place of springs, in conjunction with traditional dampers, and in 1959, the Mini was born. Initial testing of the car blew everyone away with its cornering capability. On a wet constant radius test curve, the Mini was capable of 44 miles per hour before losing control, 2 more miles per hour than the Morris Minor. The Mini had just a 30-foot turning circle and cornered on rails. But how is it so good? Well, you know what else is lightweight, has a short wheelbase, a wide track width, a low center of gravity, and small wheels at the very corner of the chassis? With their solutions to space constraints, the Mini team had inadvertently built a street-legal go-kart. While go-karts don't have suspension, the Mini's rubber cones were stiff and minimized excessive pitch and body roll. They also provided a progressive spring rate, becoming stiffer under more compression, while remaining comfortable during everyday driving. Dr. Moulton's hydrolastic system eventually made its way to the 1964 model Mini and used liquid-filled displacer units with rubber diaphragms in place of springs, which had internal damping valves. These replaced both a spring and a damper found in traditional suspension designs. The displacers were interconnected between the front and rear of the car, meaning that when the front suspension compressed, the fluid would flow from the front into the rear displacer units, and vice versa. This is how the design coped with bumps and changes in pitch. But the real secret sauce was the design's roll stiffness. Since fluid was only transferred front to rear and not side to side, roll in a corner came down to the stiffness of the rubber, resulting in very little body roll, and tires that had great contact with the road throughout the duration of a corner. With its unusual suspension and great handling, the original Mini quickly became a club racing favorite and even picked up the 1961 British Saloon Car Championship title. People were starting to take note of what the little car could really do, and a successful Formula car designer was already thinking about how to make it even more potent. John Cooper was a friend of Alec Issigonis, whom he met through competing in the Brighton Speed Trials. Cooper had visited BMC and Issigonis throughout the development of the Mini, as some of his Formula car designs also used BMC A-Series engines. As an innovator himself, Cooper saw potential early in the design, and even impressed a former Ferrari engineer with a spirited drive in a Mini prototype through the streets of Monza. He pleaded with Issigonis, and said something to the effect of, "Why don't we build one of these for the boys?" Despite Issigonis' initial hesitation and firm resolve that the Mini was a people's car and not a race car, Cooper carried on, upgrading a Mini with parts from his Formula Junior builds. He and a reluctant Issigonis eventually went before the CEO of BMC with a proposal to build an upgraded, sportier Mini. After driving their modified Mini around company grounds, George Harriman's verdict was simple: go make it. The first Mini Cooper rolled off the line for the 1961 model year, and over the regular Mini featured front disc brakes, shorter gear ratios for better acceleration, and a stroked, twin-carbureted engine with 21 more horsepower. All that was left to do was to take it racing. John Love took the wheel of the Mini Cooper in the 1962 British Saloon Car Championship and quickly proved the car's supremacy. The heavier Sunbeams, Jaguars, and Rileys had nothing for the Cooper in the corners, and Love locked in 7 race wins and the championship. If you're familiar with Minis, you'll notice that we're missing an important performance-related letter after Cooper. I'll let John Cooper himself explain where that one came from.
The first Mini Cooper was just a Mini Cooper, really, and people loved it, and it was quicker than a Mini, and it did quite well we won the Saloon Car Championship with the standard Mini and so forth. And at the end of the first season, I said, well, what we've really got to do now is we've proved that this car can win. Let's build a real one.
The Mini Cooper S debuted in 1963 with even more race-friendly upgrades. The engine's displacement was increased to 1,071 cc's, the bottom end was strengthened, and even larger disc brakes were fitted that were now vacuum boosted. Under the guidance of Stuart Turner and BMC's competition department, Mini continued their racing tour de force and turned the Cooper S loose on the rallying circuit. 1964 saw Irish rally legend Paddy Hopkirk win the Rally Monte Carlo, harnessing the Mini's uniquely capable suspension and otherworldly cornering ability. The following year was none other than Timo Makinen's turn to win that same event, but they were just getting started. In 1966, Hopkirk, Makinen, and the rally professor, Rauno Aaltonen, swept the podium at the Monte, finishing 3rd, 1st, and 2nd respectively. The celebrations were brief, however, when the ACM disqualified all 3 cars over a light bulb. Yes, you heard that right, a light bulb. The rally cars were using a single filament light bulb in the headlights, in place of the double filament bulb found in the production model. With Citroën having spent a small fortune on the development of the DS, it's a safe guess that the ACM was having a bit of a national pride issue with the British invasion, and was on the lookout for even the smallest infraction to disqualify the Minis. So what's the best thing to do when people are upset with your success? Keep succeeding. And that's exactly what Mini did, winning the 1967 Monte with Aaltonen. Mini's rallying dominance wasn't finished either. with 32 international rally victories to its name between 1960 and 1979. During that same time period, Minis racked up 5 British Saloon Car Championships, 2 European Touring Car Championships, 30 Australian endurance racing wins, and far too many more accolades to list. Although the Cooper models had a pause in production between 1971 until 1990 due to management changes, the original Mini remained in production until 2000. A 41-year production run of a largely unchanged design certainly warrants the use of the word legacy, but the original Mini was so much more than that. At a time when performance cars were rear-wheel drive behemoths with big, inefficient engines, the Mini rewrote the narrative on what a race car could and should really be. Motorsport icons Enzo Ferrari, Bruce McLaren, and Jack Brabham all reportedly owned and loved driving the original Mini, which is saying a lot considering the cars those guys had at their disposal. The Mini Cooper and Cooper S opened up a whole new category for front-wheel drive performance cars, and their DNA can still be found amongst their modern counterparts and competitors alike. To this day, classic Mini models are raced and enjoyed just as much as they were in the days of Love and Hopkirk, a testament to a car so small having one of the largest impacts in automotive history. The classic Mini stands as a British cultural icon worldwide, a symbol of turning trials into triumph, and as proof that sometimes it's the little guy that scores the biggest wins.